Who trains with up to 100 times of Earth's gravity and gets a power boost that grows his hairs? Right, it's Goku. But today we are not here to talk about Goku. Well, at least not directly. Today the focus is on the man who drew him. The man, the myth, the legend, Akira Toriyama. In this video I will go over his style and break down the anatomy, his hatching and his line art. And after all of that, I'm going to try his style out myself. First, let's start off with the characters. Of course, the most complex thing when talking about characters is usually the anatomy. As for the way Akira draws it, I would say you need a pretty good grasp on the individual muscles and their insertions. Furthermore, the muscles he draws are often stylized in a boxy and sharp way. There are mainly two body types he likes to draw. Either it's your average juiced up bodybuilder ready to step on stage, or he goes the One Piece route and draws his characters in all shapes and forms. However, this mostly applies to males, since females are usually all throughout pretty similar. Moving on, let's talk about the way he draws hands. Hands are often either boxy or very round, but this strongly depends on the age of the character and the scene he draws. But most of the time you will find that the hands are boxy. Furthermore, he likes to emphasize the knuckles and the metacarpals really strongly, and also sometimes draws parallel lines for the knuckles. And now moving on to the anatomical aspect that really makes his art style unique. His faces. The proportions are usually split about 50-50, but not entirely, as you can see here. Usually the chin area extends the face a bit. The facial features, so eyes, noses and mouths, are usually squished very closely together. Especially the nose and mouth are really close to one another. As for the facial features itself, let's start off with the eyes. The two main shapes for the eyes are either the round one or the boxy one. Also, depending on the character, he leaves out the eyebrows. Just look at Vegeta. Putting his astonishing hairline to the side for a moment, Akira switches between giving him eyebrows or, well, not giving him the brows. But when he doesn't use eyebrows on his characters, he usually emphasizes on the muscles of the brow region and shows them through hatching. Furthermore, Akira usually puts a bunch of hatches below the eye too, probably to show the volume of the eyeball that gets covered by the lower eyelid. Now, moving on to noses, they are drawn very small and often very sharp. He will just draw in the nose bridge and emphasize the triangular shape noses make at the bottom. On one side, he also sometimes draws the outer edge of the noses, and that's pretty much it. So basically small and sharp. Now, moving on to the last thing for faces, let's talk about the mouth. As with the noses, they are often pretty small. It's only in expressions that they get bigger, but very often it's still not ungodly big in most cases, like you will find in Jujutsu Kaisen. Akira tries to keep them in more of a realistic size relationship. And to close it off, he likes to emphasize the lower lip through a few hatches. Now, let's get to the thing we all love about his style. It evolves with every new power-up. You know what I'm talking about. The hairs. The way Akira draws hairs is pretty simple. Usually they are either spiky, smooth or messy. At least these are the three main hairstyles I noticed, not including bald. Since Akira's style is pretty simple and exaggerated, the hairs are no exception to that. They have really unrealistic shapes. I mean, could you imagine having this hair shape in real life? Just the amount of hair gel needed to maintain this style would get you poor, but they still look cool on paper. The way he inks his hair is usually either fully black or he keeps them white but draws in a lot of individual strands. Often the strands are focused around the hair insertions and the outer part of the hair, so the center usually doesn't have a lot of individual strands. For dark hair, however, they are often just filled with black, and sometimes he draws a few strands breaking out of the silhouette. Now, moving on to clothes, they are similar to the way he does hairs. They are just either a solid black or white. On white clothes, he draws in a good amount of folds. Well, what does good amount mean now? It means that there aren't so little folds that you don't know the fabric, and there aren't so many that it would get confusing. So basically, there are just enough folds to sell the information about the fabric and get how it works with gravity, but not so many that it gets cluttered. And as with the anatomy and hair, you will see some hatching to show the folds fading away. Overall, Akira's style of inking is pretty simple. Screen tones are rarely used and he basically only works with black and white. This goes for hairs, clothes, etc. Of course, as the manga progressed and Toyotaro started drawing the panels, this also changed. He implemented more hatching and screen tones into the panels, used grays, etc. But the key aspect of this style is to stay as simple as possible while still providing enough information for the reader. Let's move on to the hatching. Hatching is actually pretty straightforward. Most of the time you will see parallel hatches or hatches that emerge from pure black. Overall, the style isn't heavy on hatching and it is mainly used to emphasize the anatomy or wounds of characters or to show damages on armor. Another thing you can spot, especially in Dragon Ball Super, is the usage of speed lines, be it in the backgrounds or in action scenes to show an impact. They are often used to make the scene more immersive. As for cross-hatching, it is pretty rare to spot and is only used in scenes with lots of detail, but it has gotten more common since Dragon Ball Super. Same goes for screen tones. You can see them rarely, but more often in the new panels than in older ones. Now to the line art. Simply said, there isn't much to say about it. Akira and Toyotaro use line weight mainly to emphasize important features, such as the eyes, the anatomy, or certain areas in the clothes. Otherwise, the line width seems to be pretty similar all throughout. However, the thing really selling his scenes and guiding the viewer's eyes through just doing it with black and white is the way he inks, because this shows a lot of contrast. And since art is all about contrasts, the inking is usually more important in manga than the line art. Nevertheless, the lines are pretty clean and refined. Now it's time for my own try. First, I started with 2 manga panel studies. One was from the pretty old Dragon Ball and the other one from Dragon Ball Super. So first I started off with Goku as a kid, and I think he was by far the best one of all the 3 in total I made, but see for yourself. Then I moved to Vegeta and he also went pretty well in my opinion. And as always, I had to replicate this style without his panels at least once, so I decided to draw Goku hitting the side biceps and showing off his gains. Now, I still can't put my finger on it, but something seems off on this pose. Other than that, the hairs were my biggest flaw, and I definitely need to learn more about the structure of such hair types to hopefully improve in the future. Anyways, let's quickly recap everything we learned today. First, Akira likes to draw his anatomy pretty exaggerated and often very boxy, but he doesn't hesitate to go ahead and make weird shapes like you would see it in One Piece too. The faces are often split 50-50, which makes his style very impactful and individual. Thirdly, hairs, clothes, etc. are mostly inked with black and white, so he likes to put contrast inside his pieces through just those 2 values. Fourth, if you see hatching, it will most likely be parallel hatching and a bunch of speed lines, especially in action scenes, to emphasize the speed or impact of some fights. And lastly, line weight is distributed at important landmarks of the characters, such as the eyes, important clothing folds, sharp edges, muscle insertions, etc. Anyways, this was all for today's video. I hope you learned something new and I wish you a wonderful day.